I'm Dr. George Banziger. I'm a resident of Marietta, which is located in Washington County, Ohio. I have many questions about Class II injection wells, which I think have not been adequately addressed by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Oil and Gas Resource Management. In 2019, Washington County had the second highest figure of injection well activity in the state at 8.1 million barrels of brine waste, 68% of which was from out-of-state sources. Our county has the highest number of wells in the state. In 2011, there were 1.9 million barrels of brine waste injected in our county. Washington County is one of 22 counties in the officially designated Appalachian region, where the vast majority of injection wells is located. This leads to my first question. If there are deleterious effects of injection wells in this region, wouldn't this constitute a disproportionate impact and involve an issue of environmental justice? I am aware that injection wells have cement casings and annulus controls, and that they're customarily drilled to a depth of approximately 3,000 feet, while aquifers from which drinking water is obtained normally are drilled at 200 to 300 feet. This means that if properly done, injection wells should not pose any risk to aquifers or surface water. The key word in this conclusion is properly. Spills, leaks, discharges, and other potentially harmful events are not uncommon at injection well sites. On November 9th, 2020, I contacted Adam Schroeder of ODNR, and under the public record request practice, I asked for reports on the Class II injection wells in Washington County and posed some procedural and technical questions. In a timely response, Mr. Schroeder answered my questions and provided me with 23 violation reports, 26 compliance reports, and 1,155 inspection reports. I reviewed all these reports. On November 15th, I sent Mr. Schroeder some follow-up questions about the compliance and violation reports. He responded to some of these questions, but not all. On November 29th, I sent these same questions to Ms. Mary Mertz, Director of ODNR, who sent them directly to Mr. Schroeder without responding to their substance. These questions had to do with specific reports on injection wells in the county, where spills or related violations are reported, what action was taken, and whether follow-up was made. And Mr. Schroeder a list of over 25 questions from inspection reports, which I grouped into the following categories. Redbird number 4 injection well, also known as number 24, where numerous problems were cited. Spills and leaks, conditions of wells at inspection, issues related to the recently approved barge offload facility in Marietta, owned by Deep Rock Disposal, ownership of wells, and roads and transport to wells. I have not yet received a response to any of these questions, several of which relate to spills and leaks at dikes and other places, which may have flowed into aquifers, streams, and rivers. On February 5th, 2021, I sent another message to Mr. Schroeder asking him to please respond to the questions I posed on December 9th regarding inspection reports, and to respond to some immediate questions I had about a reported spill on January 20th, 2021 at Deep Rock injection well facility near Marietta. One of my questions about the spill was whether there's any evidence that brine waste from the spill entered streams in the Ohio River. At this date, I have not received any response to these questions. Neither have there been any public hearings on inspection wells in this county. Regarding spills at these wells, what follow-up and enforcement actions ODNR has taken, and how such spills can be reduced or eliminated in the future. I've written to State Senator Frank Hoagland, who represents Washington County, about my questions. His office contacted ODNR, which responded in a message merely identifying their standard procedures. I also contacted State Representative Don Jones, who represents the part of Washington County where I reside, and have received no response. As a concerned resident in Washington County and one who has reviewed the numerous reports of Class II injection wells in the county, it is my observation that ODNR does not have the human or physical resources to conduct a complete regimen of inspection, which they're supposed to do every 11 to 13 weeks. Follow-up and enforcement required of these facilities, which pose environmental and health risks to the county and indeed to the entire state. Until ODNR answers these numerous questions, it is my recommendation that all activity at injection wells be halted, or at the very least, no additional permits for Class II injection wells be approved. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ron Prosek. I live in Mentor in Lake County, Ohio. Currently, I am president of Faith Communities Together for a Sustainable Future, the statewide 501c3 public charity that is composed of members from faith communities all around Ohio. I have been working on oil gas issues since 2008, when a gas drilling rig suddenly appeared in the middle of our city, about 100 feet from the door of a large apartment complex that included a sheltered workshop for the developmentally disabled. This led me to become involved in issues relating to conventional vertical wells in Northeast Ohio, and later on with deep shale horizontal wells and Class II frac injection wells all around Ohio. During the time that I was involved in these issues, there were some pretty shocking incidents, including a gas explosion under a home in Bainbridge Township in Geauga County from a leaking gas well that took out the water wells of several dozen houses and those of the fire and police center. Another incident was a large hydrogen sulfide leak from a gas well that drifted some distance and settled on a home in Concord Township in Lake County that was badly contaminated and which sickened some of the occupants. And of course, there were many other situations. We all remember the series of earthquakes in the Youngstown area that was caused by a Class II injection well that was later found to have been drilled too deep. ODNR acted after the fact, but why didn't they properly regulate to prevent this well from being drilled too deep in the first place? I remember sitting at a meeting in one community in which residents complained that ODNR was not enacting any penalties against well operators in violation of state regulations. The ODNR representative at the meeting replied that ODNR felt that they could do more good by, quote, working with the violators toward achieving remediation, end quote. But the point was, this approach afforded little accountability and even less deterrence against future violations. When remediation occurred, it was done very slowly, allowing harms to continue for an extended period of time. Before the pandemic, my organization, FACT, participated in a public meeting at a church in Jefferson in Ashtabula County. We heard accounts from residents of complaints to ODNR about injection wells that had contaminated their water wells. Several displayed samples of horribly discolored water taken from their taps, as well as sludge-filled filters from their water intakes from their wells, harms they attributed to the numerous Class II injection wells throughout Ashtabula County. They complained that ODNR had done nothing to help them, though they had complained to them repeatedly. If you look at ODNR injection well reports, as I have done just recently with reports from Ashtabula County, you will see a pattern. A violation is noted and the remediation process is prolonged over many months, and no penalties, no fines, and no revocation of permits. One of the main problems is that under Ohio's oil and gas law, ODNR is assigned two conflicting responsibilities: to promote oil and gas development and to enforce oil and gas rules and regulations. This is an obvious conflict of missions. I remember sitting in a conference room in the state capitol about 10 years ago with the governor's chief of staff and several other state officials. I made the comment that having ODNR financed by well permits is a conflict of interest. The governor's chief of staff seemed taken aback, but then replied, quote, "Well, the governor has made it clear that he wants ODNR and other state agencies to pay for their own operations as much as possible," end quote. I was shocked at this reply. It told me that the state didn't care about this conflict of missions and this conflict of interest. No, the state of Ohio should not continue to have primacy in the UIC program. They have demonstrated time and again, in my experience, that they are far more dedicated to the promotion of oil and gas development than they are to enforcing necessary safety and environmental rules and regulations. Thank you.
Director Reagan, thank you for allowing me this time to present my concerns about the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Oil and Gas Natural Resources Management, the primacy over underground injection control in the state of Ohio, as well as the management of all oil and gas wastewaters generated both within and without the state. Surely you've heard much expert and knowledgeable testimony. My testimony, it comes with a personal perspective and a professional plea to examine this issue in its entirety: waste management. My name is Tim Kettler, and I'm a resident of Monroe Township, Coshocton County, Ohio. I've been a mom and pop entrepreneur for nearly 50 years, a wastewater professional with 35 years experience in the field, an Appalachian, Ohio resident, and an Ohio EPA certified Class 1 wastewater operator. All qualifications, I believe, that demonstrate standing to address the existing primacy over Ohio's UIC program. Bluntly said, it's my intention to offer the most persuasive argument I can. And with my professional knowledge and hands-on experience and what I've seen with my own eyes and videos and photos I'll share with you, and that are permitted under trust we afford to the ODNR and DOGRM, and the primacy granted to them for all oil and gas wastewater management through the authority of the United States EPA. My professional background, my entrepreneurial aspirations as a lifelong small business person, and our shared mission to protect the environment tells me what I do see is not in the best interests of Ohioans. When the public trust is lost or never established in the first place in environmental policy in our state, we look to the US EPA to serve as protector of public and private property owned by the people in the spirit and light that many of us recall as the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and the agency that saw to it that the public and environment are protected, always. My professional interaction with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency is generally through the Division of Drinking and Groundwater and the Division of Surface Water. I am familiar with much of the oil and gas wastewater concerns that have been and will be expressed to you. Although I'm no expert on injection wells, while injection wells become surface discharge problems, such as this, then you have my attention and the offer of help from my experience and the shared mission of a small company and the U.S. EPA to protect the waters of the state of Ohio. This photo and this photo are an injection well in Shotton County, as is the 11-second video, which we will submit during a regular monsoon rain event. This well site is in current operation, overflows like this on a regular basis, and it's hard to believe that this is simply standard operating procedure. This well is adjacent to surface water bodies that seasonally flood as well. Anecdotally, containment around most of all conventional well sites locally, both production and injection, are breached regularly. Sites where brine is also stored, overflowing into the waters of the state of Ohio. That is not management. This final photo is particularly illustrative of the failure of ODNR to protect we Ohioans. This photo is of brine, oil and gas wastewater spread on a stretch of road that affects the watershed to our family's domestic water supply, especially during heavy rains. The township uses this wastewater under authority of the ODNR as a winter ice and snow melter and a summertime dust suppressant on county and township roads. Excuse me. The township uses this wastewater under their authority. The section shown is not along my specific property frontage, but begins at a property line. It is within the watershed of our surface water supply. This road is built on exposed bedrock with faults and major fissures. Brine was spread here in front of an unoccupied property. Surely the alarm this raises, both personally and professionally, is understandable. Let me ask you, sir, how would you perceive this threat to your own family's water supply? This is ODNR management. These instances where oil and gas are presented as an economic benefit are more and more becoming instances of potential, if not probable, environmental devastation. Yet huge concessions are made to the business at the expense of the environment. I ask that you consider those of us in professions that work to ensure a cleaner environment, that celebrate the value of recreation and the protection of our natural places. We who work in businesses developing sustainable solutions to our certain future needs. Sir, our needs require more effective and immediate leadership on oil and gas wastewater management in the state of Ohio. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources and Division of Oil and Gas Resources Management, as regulatory authority, have failed to protect the soil, air, and waters of the state of Ohio. This is a very brief presentation given, but with the cooperation of the ODNR and DOGRAM as both regulator and marketer of Ohio oil and gas and cheerleader for the industries, they have placed the soil, air, and waters of the state of Ohio and all Ohioans at tremendous risk. I join my friends, neighbors, and colleagues today in requesting the revocation of primacy of regulatory control from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources over the underground injection control program in our state. We request that regulatory control over the UIC program be returned to the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Respectfully, sir, thank you. And once again, Tim Kepler.
My name is Lori Bobby, and I'm from Portage County, Ohio. My experiences with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources began in 2010, when landmen descended on northeastern Ohio due to their renewed interest in leasing land for horizontal fracking and the accompanying underground injection wells. Over the years, my experience with ODNR is that they are dismissive of public concerns and ultimately defend and protect any and all actions of the oil and gas industry. In Ohio, the permitting process is too quick and easy, There is a history of not enough inspectors, and our regulations are far too weak. For example, in 2013, citizens performed their own injection well audit of ODNR inspection reports, and we found irregular inspections and lack of consistent follow-up on violations. This confirmed public distrust of their inspection processes. Why should citizens have to monitor inspections to protect our drinking water? In 2012, the citizens of Portage County had serious concerns about 7 injection wells and accompanying horizontal wells located on one property in Windham and Nelson Townships. These wells are a significant source of potential drinking water contamination. I personally submitted a request for a public hearing and specific questions related to those injection wells to ODNR. Despite a public outcry for a hearing during the permitting process, there was no response from ODNR. Therefore, to make the most knowledgeable comments on an industrial process that could alter our drinking water forever, a people's public hearing was held in September 2012 in Ravenna, Ohio. This was before the public comment period was officially over for those 7 injection wells. 40 citizens were in attendance. Their concerns were documented and submitted to ODNR. Ultimately, the well permits were approved with no acknowledgement of any citizen questions or concerns. 9 months after that public comment period was closed and the permits for those 7 injection wells had been issued, ODNR finally held a, quote, open house informational meeting, end quote, on May 30th of 2013 at Wingfoot Lake State Park. The location was over 30 miles from the impact zone, despite ODNR's promise that the open house would be held within the area of the proposed injection well application. The notification also lacked any specific information about the injection wells in question. At the open house, we were met with 14 armed guards and 1 canine unit lining the access walk into the building. Purses were searched before we could enter. Once the open house began, the armed guards stood behind each information table and lined up at all of the entrances and exits. It clearly was an attempt to intimidate those in attendance. And let me note here that there had never been any incidents of violence prior to this that would have required such a military presence. We were denied the right to videotape inside the building, even though this was promoted as an open public meeting. ODNR employees were located at multiple information tables, which was a tool used to break up the crowd and prevent people from hearing the same information at the same time. Due to the size of the crowd in the large open room with no acoustics, no amplification, it was impossible to hear the answers to questions asked by each person at each table. During the second half of that open house, we were forced to listen to a 30-minute history of oil and gas drilling from Mr. Tom Tomastik, who at the time was the chief geologist at ODNR. At no time were any of the specific questions about the Windham and Nelson Township wells brought up or addressed by Mr. Tomastik or his staff, even though our email invitation specifically stated that they would provide information about those wells. Mr. Tomastik left the building immediately following his presentation, showing no interest in or respect for the citizens of Ohio. At that point, citizens were permitted to stand and share their questions with the audience. However, our questions were not answered by the ODNR staff that was there. It took 4 months for ODNR staff to finally respond to our questions via their website. This was a failed attempt to placate the public when a true public hearing was denied. These are only 2 examples of the barriers to real protection of our drinking water here in Ohio. Ultimately, ODNR's allegiance is to their funders, the oil and gas industry. This must change to truly protect the drinking water and public health in Ohio. Thank you.
Susie Beiersdorfer, and I have lived in Youngstown, Ohio, Mahoney County for 27 years. I'm a teacher, a geologist, and I was a mudlogger in the oil and gas fields of California in the 1980s. My experience with the ODNR's Division of Oil and Gas began in 2011 when our area began experiencing earthquakes, later to be proven to be caused by the injection of fracking fluids into the DNL North Star 1 Class 2 injection well. It was found that the operators had been injecting above the pressure limit permitted by the ODNR. We came to learn that the ODNR was not prepared for the fracking boom, unresponsive to citizen concerns and requests, biased towards industry, and delinquent in its duties of permitting, regulating, and monitoring through regular on-site inspections. We also learned that Ohio was given primacy by the US EPA for the UIC program for Class 2 wells in 1983. I begin with the 2011 Youngstown earthquakes. The first felt earthquake was in March 2011, and over the next 7 months, more felt earthquakes, as well as hundreds of non-felt earthquakes, occurred. For many months, the ODNR brushed off citizens' concerns and denied any connection between these earthquakes and injection activity. With several scientists among our local group, we knew that the well could not be implicated as the source of the earthquakes without further scientific data, though the timing and location certainly made the North Star 1 suspect. In November of 2011, Columbia University set up seismometers and found that North Star 1 was indeed the source of the earthquakes. After confirmation in another earthquake on Christmas Eve of magnitude 2.7, the well was shut down by governor's orders on December 30th. On December 31st, an earthquake of 3.9 magnitude occurred and was felt from Canada to Kentucky. The New Year's Eve quake caused some damage to structures and numerous cracks in walls, concrete, and foundations all over the region. On January 11th, 2012, a public meeting with over 800 participants, national media, was hosted by Youngstown officials and officials from the ODNR. While angry residents wanted answers about the cause of the earthquakes, earthquake damage and insurance, and what was going to be done to stop the earthquakes, the ODNR presented a totally irrelevant PowerPoint presentation on the history of oil and gas in Ohio, while trying to assure the audience that everything was under control and there was no need to worry. The crowd vehemently disagreed. This is just one of many ODNR dog and pony shows that I have attended. There was an ODNR preliminary report on the seismic events from the North Star 1 released in March 2012, but to my knowledge, a final report was never released. Shortly after, the ODNR proposed new rules regarding injection wells, which included mandatory seismic monitoring. There was also a rule that, quote, requires the installation of an electronic data recording system for purposes of tracking all fluids brought by a brine transporter for injection. Unfortunately, this rule has never been implemented, for if it had been, it may have prevented the owner of the North Star 1 well from illegally dumping about 250,000 gallons of toxic radioactive fracking waste into the Mahoning River between September 2012 and January 2013. The dumping was discovered in February of 2013, and while the company spokesman denied any involvement and promoted the safety practices of the company, a Tuesday, February 13th Vindicator article described the company practices and that investigations in 2012 revealed that DNL has a history of at least 120 violations at 32 injection and extraction wells across Ohio. Back to the seismic concerns, my late husband, Dr. Ray Beiersdorfer, geology professor at YSU, compiled a table of human-induced earthquakes in Ohio that were within the parameters to be reported, but never were reported by the ODNR website. He also showed that though they claimed to address limitations to locations for new injection wells, there were numerous inconsistencies and inaccuracies. In September of 2015, after repeated back and forth emails, Steve Irwin, Public Information Officer of ODNR, said, and I quote, "As you may know, the recent US EPA Region 5 report on Ohio's Class 2 injection well program praised the division as a leader in terms of addressing seismic potential during the review of permit applications and well operations." Now, also included in the North Star 1 rules was that it needed to be plugged within 60 days after it was shut down. Well, it was shut down on December 30th, 2011. And it expired, a permit to plug it expired on June 6, 2019, and it was recently labeled an orphan well. There's an April 2021 article about that. And so the patterns of avoidance, non-response, denial, and incompetence continue. I have centered my testimony to the Youngstown area, but know of many more incidents that demand that Ohio's primacy over the Class 2 wells be revoked, as the ODNR division has been egregiously inept in protecting the natural resources. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay. Hi, my name is John Williams. I live in McDonald, Ohio. For the last 10 years, I made it my personal mission to look after the jewel of Mahoning Valley, Meander Reservoir. This incredible man-made reservoir was completed in 1932 and has a 40-mile shoreline. Meander Dam, a high-hazard dam, is located inside the city limits of Niles. On December 31st, 2011, the Mahoning Valley was rocked by a 4.0 earthquake caused by the North Star 1 injection well in Youngstown. Prior to the earthquake, this 80-year-old dam was in need of $4 million in repairs. After the quake, those estimates rose to $28 million. Meander Dam spent big money to study what caused the damage. The outcome of the study was they don't know if the quakes caused the damage or if the workers just did not notice the cracks all over the place until after the earthquake. But $24 million of damage was caused by something. Anyway, Governor Kasich ordered the North Star 1 injection well shut down, and he ordered ODNR to conduct a complete study as to what causes the earthquakes. This is that study. Oh boy. Okay. The study is now on screen, was dated March of 2012. The late Dr. Ray Beiersdorfer, geology professor at Youngstown State University, told me that this is good science. I was happy to hear that ODNR was capable of good science. On page 17 of this report, ODNR concludes that induced seismic activity is not easy to do. It requires 4 conditions to be met. And these are those conditions. I am very concerned that all 4 of these conditions are present at the North Star Collins saltwater injection well in Coatesville. Condition number 1. There's 1. A fault must already exist within the crystalline basement rock. Okay. 2 facts. North Star 1 is now on a known fault. Okay. And the other fact is most faults in Ohio trend northwest to southeast. And this map actually came from the ODNR website. It shows the trending of of the fault lines. Number two, the fault must be in a near failure state of stress. Okay, Rick Simmers, Chief of Oil and Gas at ODNR, testified at a public hearing that seismic events from induced seismicity tend to increase in magnitude as injection continues. North Star 1 may be in a pre-stressed state of 4.0 already. So what is next? Here's condition number 3. So far, we've met both of the first of the two. Number 3, an injection well must be drilled deep enough and near enough to the fault to have a path of communication to the fault. According to USGS, seismicity can be induced at distances of 10 miles or more away from the injection point and at significantly greater depths than the injection well. The North Star Collins saltwater injection well in Coatesville is only 7.35 miles southwest of North Star 1. That's 7.35 miles south of North Star 1. We've met question number 3. Let's take a look at question number 4. The injection well must inject a sufficient quantity of fluids at high enough pressure for an adequate period of time to cause failure or movement along that fault. North Star Collins was permitted to inject at 1,890 psi with volumes up to 147,000 gallons injected every day. Is that enough to cause induced seismicity? You betcha. Can Meander Dam, in its damaged condition, handle another 4.0? If it can't, 11 billion gallons of water, 70 feet high, will crash down on the south side of Niles, killing thousands, and wash most of it down the Mahoning River, flooding Girard, Youngstown, Struthers, and Lowellville. And 330,000 people will lose their water supply. If this is a situation that the U.S. EPA does not wish to inherit, I urge the U.S. EPA to check out this situation of conditions in which ODNR ignores their own science. You're welcome. And for more information, you can get everything on that website. Ta-da.
In the northeast corner. And I first became aware of fracking and subsequently the waste injection wells in 2010, and very soon learned that what ODNR touts as the protection that those provide to our drinking water supplies, namely the concrete, is has serious problems, and that even as the concrete is poured, experts say that it develops cracks. So by 2012, the late summer of 2012, early September, when we became aware of the Sawinski property, where 2 deep shale horizontal wells were being drilled, and there was a permit for 7 waste injection wells on the same property, we became alarmed for particularly the people closest to the area. And we're asking for ODNR for more detailed information and questioning the placement of and the permitting of 7 waste injection wells. So my first email was September 12th of 2012 requesting that information. By September 17th, I'd gotten an email from Tom Tomasco, to the geologist, telling me that I could find some of the information I was requesting on Frack Free America's website. And that was why he didn't need to send it to me. And then we began to request a public hearing, and it took until October 10th before I got the promise of not a hearing, but it wasn't until May 21st I finally got a message saying that yes, an open public meeting was going to be held on May 30th. So I had, after waiting from September until May 21st to even find out about the scheduling of this meeting, which was supposed to answer all our questions about the Sawinski waste injection wells. I had all of 9 days to get the word out, to let people know that that's what was going to happen on May 30th. And then you've heard from Lori Bobby the details of the armed guards and the canine units, and the fact that nobody was actually listening to what the citizens had to say about their concerns, and that our questions weren't answered in any kind of public manner. That's been typical of my experience with ODNR. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, this is Phil Pegg, Vienna Township trustee, Trumbull County. In 2014, a company, Cleese Development Associates, received their permit to inject wells on their property at the corner of Warren Sharon and Sodom Hutchings Road in Vienna Township. Warren Sharon Road has public water. All of the homes on Sodom Hutchings are on well water. On or about April 3rd, it was Good Friday in 2015, our residents, the Hopkinsons, on the east side of Sodom Hutchings Road, noticed that their pond had a plume underneath the ice. There was still ice on the pond. And upon further investigating, there was an odor coming from that area. And again, being on Sodom Hutchings, the Hopkinsons are on well water. And their well is less than 150 feet from that pond. So they were quite concerned, made some phone calls. But other things they noticed in the days previous to this was Cleese Development Associates, and I'll call them KDA from this point, were working on the property just north and just east of them, which they owned. They couldn't understand why there was a backhoe back there and several dump trucks. And they just couldn't understand what was happening. So they made some phone calls. The state came out and immediately determined that there had been a leak at the KDA injection injection site. This site was built and approved under direction from the ODNR. Things that should have occurred was ODNR should have been assured that they had put all of the drainage in place properly, that there should have been a liner underneath the facility. These things were later found to never have happened. What occurred was on the pad where the trucks were unloading, there was a leak in that system. Now, where that corner is, and it's approximately 60 to 70 acres, it was a farm. The fields there were tiled to get the water out so they could be farmed. Well, the brine and the oil and the other chemicals found one of those tiles, ended up dumping into a creek on the west side of Sodom Hutchings Road, went through the pipe to the east side of Sodom Hutchings Road into a wetlands, and then from there into the pond that the Hutchings owned, and continued further down that creek a short distance where, when it was finally discovered, that's where it was stopped. Things that concerned us: number one, there was no liner underneath that pad, which KDA claimed was there. No one was found negligence for that. The negligence party, we believe, is ODNR for not confirming that there was a liner underneath that pad. The lines for the drainage were never removed, and the line from the pad into the facility was never inspected by ODNR. Shortly thereafter, ODNR and KDA, and they hired outside contractors to clean up the mess. ODNR and KDA never informed the local government officials or even the local residents that the leak had occurred. Even though as soon as the truck showed up, we showed up, but no one would tell us what was going on. And there was a distinct stench of petroleum and other chemicals at that site if you were downwind of it. One of the first things that I did was I purchased the Hopkinsons water so that they would have water for their 4 children, and they had something to drink. It took us some time to get ODNR to take samples of those families that were on well water in that area, and to get it to Columbus to have tests done to see if the well water was even safe to drink. In the meantime, they were forced to use that water to wash their clothes, to bathe, and everything else that they needed it for. ODNR failed poorly, very, very poorly. They failed. In the pond adjacent to the Hutchinsons, there was a fish die-off. There were turtles that died, birds that died, muskrats floating on the water. ODNR sent their Division of Wildlife to the site to investigate the death of the wildlife. The local wildlife warden came out, took photos. We've got a nice file of all the animals that were killed, photos of the oily substance in the wetlands and the other areas. And when the local warden finished, he and the director at KDA, I was told, went to lunch. After all, the director of KDA and the game warden's wife are cousins. So evidently they don't have ethics the way public officials do at ODNR. KDA, no one at KDA has been fined. The original pump stations have all been removed. There has yet to be a final report filed by ODNR. And, we've just reached 6 years since the incident happened. No fines levied. Nothing done to the people who caused this. And there's other irregularities. ODNR Oil and Gas estimated that the loss of the substance from their spill, is what they called it, was 3,000 gallons. Now, ODNR had control of everything on KDA's property. But as soon as that fluid exited into the creek and went across to the east side of Sodom Hutchings, that was no longer ODNR's responsibility officially. At that point, the Ohio EPA took over. They were the ones off site that oversaw the cleanup. OEPA, in their report, estimated that between 7,000 and 10,000 gallons escaped. I can't believe there's a discrepancy between the ODNR and OEPA. To me, it seems quite simple. A truck comes into the facility, dumps its load, it's separated, understand that. Oil is taken out. The rest of the fluid's allowed to let all the sediment settle. But there should be records of all of that. How much was dumped into the system? How much oil came out? How much fluid remains? That should all add up. I mean, it's simple math. How long was that site leaking fluids into the creek and destroying the wetlands? And no one did the math to notice that there was missing materials? This not only is critical of KDA, but it's extremely critical of ODNR that they can't do simple math in Columbus. It's just very, very frustrating for the local people, local government, to have no control over this. Yes, tests were done on those local wells at the beginning, and then a second test was done. But again, we're 6 years later. When was the last time a test was done on those wells to see if they're safe? Are the people drinking contaminated water from the aquifer? And since the plant, the pumping plant and settling plant, has all been removed, Vienna still retains 4 shallow wells that are unplugged and 1 deep well, and none of them have been plugged. And we go back to North Star over in Mahoning County. Since the company went bankrupt, we've got open holes sitting in the ground. There is supposed to be a fund to fix all of that. KDA is still in existence. Since the incident in 2015, a new well, deep well, has been drilled on State Route 193 adjacent to the Youngstown-Warren Airport, which is also home of the 910th Air Wing, Air Force Reserves. This well is less than 200 yards from the end of the runway. Again, ODNR oversaw the building of the site. This time they did confirm that there was a liner underneath the facilities. The only problem was the facility was not built to the specifications given to ODNR and ODOT. We now have the problem that vehicles, the trucks leaving the facility, they must cross because the turning angle is too long to get onto State Route 193 to proceed south. We have pursued this to have them correct this before someone is killed. And the State Attorney General's office has been informed, as well as ODOT. And again, to date, nothing has been done. This is another KDA facility. We are just extremely frustrated by how everything has been handled by the state of Ohio and their lack of any information coming to local government so that we can look out for our citizens. So I would like to thank you and express our concerns that the ODNR Oil and Gas Division is failing in their job. Thank you.
Julie's the real expert, and I've just been sort of around in the Columbus Community Bill of Rights group. We're most focused now on the injection wells up in Morrow County that have been just very old production wells typically back in the 80s, the 70s, the 80s. They turned 13 or 14 of these things into injection wells, and they're all, we've got them on our website, pictures of them, and some of them just look like they're falling down. And we understand that if they look like that on the surface, then the pipes going down to wherever they're supposed to go are probably half existent or non-existent in some of them. I know they do the pressure checks on them, and there's been many failed inspections over the years with a lot of these wells because they can't hold their pressure, or like the operator that runs most of these things, he overpressurizes some of them and they stop them, and so they just go back and forth with all these violations and orders to stop for a while. Then they supposedly fix it and they keep going with all these old pieces of junk they use for wells. That's kind of what we're dealing with Columbus Community Bill of Rights. We want to get a monitoring going with the city of Columbus. We've actually had Julie with us. Thank God we have Julie. But we visited the city water, Columbus Utilities water department. We had a meeting with them about 3 years ago. We're going to try and get another meeting. We've tried to meet with all the city council members. And Shannon Harden, who's now the president of Columbus City Council, was supportive with us last year that, we wanted to get a baseline water monitoring going for the Columbus watershed, for going into the Hoover and Alum Creek reservoirs, our main sources, I believe, for water in the city and many of the suburbs. And so we're trying to get that going. In the time that I have, Julie can give a lot of details of specific stuff, but I'm hoping I could show a couple of pictures of what we're talking about. We've done a lot of injection well tours over the last few years. Okay, if I share. See this, can everybody see the picture of the truck by the well tank there? I just want to make sure. Okay. This is the power well. This is on our Columbus Community Bill of Rights website. I put a lot of these wells up, and this first picture was in 2015, one of our injection well tours. We were taking pictures, and this truck actually drove up. He started injecting into the well, and when he saw us there, he tried to intimidate us. He took his camera and he was taking pictures of the license plates of our cars, and wondered what we were doing there. Then we came back 2 years later, this is the same well. They had upgraded it. And we were wondering if maybe they had done that because we had been there and brought some attention to it. But they put this big berm there and a new tank and so forth. But before that, this well had been around for a long time back. I think it was 1990, if I remember. This well had a stoppage order because they couldn't hold their pressure. Somehow they fixed it and they were up and running again. But you know, these are the types of things that that we've been dealing with looking at the tours. And we took Shannon Hardin, we took a couple of the city council members up on our tours. We actually got an Ohio legislator up there. And I just wanted to show one more picture of a brother, if I could find it. Sorry, okay, this was a Morrow County Sentinel reporter took a picture of this. This was actually a spill from a tank from the major operator in Morrow County. And this was in a stream in I think it was the Big Walnut or the Little Walnut stream. And it was off his property. And I don't know how many days it took to clean it up, but this is what happens when a tank leaks. And I can't get these pictures to perform the way I want them to. Sorry. I just wanted to kind of show one of the examples that we had in Morrow County of a real big leak with these problems we have with the operators and so forth. That nobody does anything about it, really. You know, you hear about it in the paper once and then nothing happens. And I just one more thing I wanted to show. Let's see if I can get it here off our website. All right. This is what we've seen in Morrow County. This is all in our watershed for Columbus Public Water. This is on our main injection well page. This is a Olympic-sized swimming pool right here. It holds 660,000 gallons of water. Okay, if you take 928 of those Olympic-sized pools, which you see right here in this little diagram, as of 2017, that was how much frack waste has been injected underneath our watershed in Morrow County over the last 30 or 40 years. And that comes out to over 500 million gallons of radioactive frack waste that's been disposed of underneath our watershed. And I'm not even going to talk about, we know we've had 2 truck spills and several spills in Morrow County. And this is all within our source water protection area for Columbus Water. And Julie can speak to that better than I can. But I think that's really about all that I had to say. I'm just trying to shorten it up so Julie can talk more, and I don't want to take too much time. But we don't see that the Ohio Department of Natural Resources or the regulatory environment in Ohio is really doing anything to resolve this situation in any manner. They just basically keep regulations that the State House has so that they can continue to do this and continue just dumping this frack waste they don't know what to do with, and put it wherever they can. Nothing's ever done any differently than that. Never has been, and I don't see that it will now. One other thing I wanted to mention is since 2017, I don't know if we had this on testimony before today, but ODNR did some radium testing, and they showed that the amount of radium-226 and 228 in these frack wastes, just for these conventional wells, is way over the environmental discharge limits of the EPA. And again, there's no regulation, there's nothing. This has been 3 years going that we know that they know about this, and there's nothing's going on to help to alleviate this situation. I think I'm going to hold it off at that and let Julie talk, or if people have questions.
Okay. Julie Weatherington Rice. I am a master's level geologist, hydrogeologist, doctorate level soil scientist. My expertise is chemistry and physics of earthen materials. I have been working with the interaction of oil and gas wastes and water supplies since 1977. I was bequeathed this topic by my hydrogeology professor, Dr. Wayne Prejean, who did some of the original reporting and research on the Morrow County fiascos, and who sent me to do follow-up on that while I was working on my master's thesis, because the contamination came as far down as Westerville, Ohio. Alum Creek Dam was not in place yet, and the brines pouring into the groundwater and surface waters in Morrow County from the runaway drilling contaminated the water supply all the way down to Westerville. So I want to talk about the natural systems. Now, you know, we've got 300,000, close to 300,000 oil and gas wells that we've been drilling since 1860 in Ohio. We've got somewhere around and we don't know where most of those are. We have somewhere around 1 million drinking water wells. We have probably half of eastern Ohio hollowed out with underground coal mining. Lots of places for things to escape to and move into. But before all that happened, we have natural systems that affect Ohio, that affect all the earth, that really made the whole idea of injection wells not work anyway. We have in Ohio a Precambrian rift valley. This is like the Rift Valley in Africa, where a plate decides to split, and it splits in 3 ways, and 1 way fails, and the other 2 ways go. And the way that failed comes up through the New Madrid Fault from Missouri, which had the worst earthquakes ever measured in North America, up through Maysville, Kentucky, up through Cincinnati, on up to Grand Lake St. Mary's, where it splits and goes to Fort Wayne, and then goes on up to Lake Erie. And if you look at where the 3 functioning Class 1 injection wells are in the state of Ohio, they line up on that Rift Valley. They're AK Steel in Middletown. They're the Lima BP, which is now called something else, and the Victory site. The little town of Anna, Ohio, has had more earthquakes than any place else in the state of Ohio, going back as far as anybody has any records. But Ohio is underlain with faults and fractures, especially high angle ones, all over the place. And that's because Ohio has gone up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down for eons. And every time the rocks move, because they're not rubber, they're brittle, they break. And all of those break zones become areas where fluids can cause earthquakes. And that's what we are seeing. The reason that the Class 1 wells work is because they're draining into this rift zone. No one has any idea where they're going. And of course, nobody's monitoring. Nobody looks. It's like it goes down this deep, dark hole. It's like it goes into a black hole and pops up in a parallel universe. But it doesn't. It goes down and it moves. And we don't know where it moves until something is lubricated enough to make it move. When we have a natural earthquake, you have the big quake because it's stress building, it releases, and then each additional quake is less and less and less. When they're man-made quakes, they reverse. They're small and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. we had a class 1 injection well established in Ashtabula County, and ODNR, Division of Geological Survey, told them not to put it there, told US EPA, do not permit it because you're on top of a major fault. But of course, nobody listens to the geologists of Ohio, never. And so, of course, they put them in, and in a few years, it started quaking. And as far as I know, that site continued to quake for another 10 or 15 years after that injection well was shut down. So we've had experiences with class 1 wells quaking. So when we started to have the experience with the class 2 wells, it wasn't like it was a big surprise. Everybody was expecting this to happen. So we've got the wonderful documentation that Dr. Ray pulled together, and thank you, Susie, for sending me that database. He has had documentation of over 1,000 quakes for the few short years that he was working on that data. We still have ongoing data being derived from the Lamont Doherty lab, from US Geological Survey, and from the Miami of Ohio University. No one is collecting that, but they could update it. We were over 1,000. With Ray's data, that ended in 2017. How many more? Well, we keep hearing about earthquakes, so we know there are more. We have the situation of the earthquakes down in Washington County. And where were those injection wells? Well, they were right down the road from the Burning Springs anticline. Now, why was it called the Burning Springs anticline? It was called the Burning Springs anticline because gas came to the surface and you could light it on fire. So who was so brilliant to think that that area would be secure enough to put an injection well? An anticline is an arched facility and it is fractured. Anybody with any basic geology at all should have known that that was not a good idea to put in a saltwater injection well. But under the years, especially the Tom Tomastik was in charge, if you wanted an injection well, you could get it, and you could get it in 3 months. If you wanted one from US EPA, you could get it, but it might take you 3 years. But, oh, we could put injection wells so fast. And that's what happened. So Ohio is just rift with fault systems. It's rift with fractures. It's rift with all kinds of places that if you inject, you're going to get movement. We've got a well that Teresa talks to me about in, I believe it's Athens County, that's down in Ohio Shale. And Ohio Shale is the formation, the bottom of it is the Marcellus, which is so tight that you have to fracture this stuff to get anything out of it. But there's a saltwater injection well down there that literally is working on gravity drain. That's impossible, but it's happening. So clearly we have people totally ignoring basic Ohio subsurface geology and just simply making random decisions that things will work without checking to see if they will. And then in the case of Youngstown, when you discover you've got yet another fault system that you didn't know about because you started quaking, instead of immediately shutting down and saying, okay, we stop here, no, we keep nursing it along. And we keep going, oh, well, if we only do this much pressure, it won't be a problem. This stuff is going somewhere. It has to, because full is full. And if you keep pouring into full, you will move. And where you will move, since you're not monitoring and you're not checking, no one knows, but it's going. So we have no idea where we are harming the environment. Is it bubbling up under the Ohio River? Possibly. Is it bubbling up through the old oil and gas wells that are underneath all of the reservoirs up there? Yeah, that's real possible. I mean, the possibilities are infinitesimal. But if you don't look, you don't find it. And if you deny that the geology is there, you approve anything. When you have those cavalier expectations, you can only produce disasters.
My name is Dan Phillips. I am a resident at 12898 Painesville Warren Road, and that's in Leroy Township, Ohio, in Lake County. And I would like to share my personal experiences living within approximately 1 mile of the injection well, which is located on the northwest corner of Route 90 and Vrooman Road. This is a Class 2 injection well. Since the time of the injection well was permitted 13 years ago, over 15 million gallons of toxic fluid of unknown chemical property have been injected into the ground, which now has migrated to an unknown distance and to an unknown extended area under Leroy Township and also our surrounding communities, since it's on the northern side of Leroy Township. And those would be Perry Township and Painesville Township. And this injection well is located less than 1,000 feet from the wild and scenic Grand River, riparian corridor, which is one of the few in all of Ohio. And it is a region of Northeast Ohio that is considered susceptible to earthquakes. In fact, Leroy Township experienced a 5.0 magnitude earthquake in January of 1986. The injection well is located in close proximity to Leroy Township residents on Vrooman Road. Residents in Leroy Township do not have city water and rely on groundwater to support essential health activities such as drinking, washing, and bathing. The majority of the water wells in Vrooman Road in the vicinity of the injection well are no longer healthy to use. And many residents now have water trucked to their homes. The water quality in a resident water well on an adjacent property several hundred feet from the injection well changed to the point the resident could no longer use it. I visited with this resident who showed me his contaminated, unusable water. He explained how the water well had gone bad. Once the water quality in the aquifer is compromised, there is no way to clean it up. The resident passed away in 2017 after a long battle with cancer at the age of 62. A large number of the residents on Vrooman Road within a half mile of the injection well have died or moved away in the past 5 to 10 years. The ODNR permitting process for the injection well in Leroy Township was rapidly conducted without ample time for residents to provide meaningful input and request a public hearing. The 15-day comment period is not adequate, and the majority of Leroy Township residents were unaware that the public notice existed. ODNR only provides the opportunity to review the permit application and not the permit itself. Residents in proximity to the proposed injection well were not contacted. No baseline of water well quality was taken, and no assessment of later impacts on water quality were required. No air quality or noise assessments or environmental impact studies were conducted or required. Lake County has only one air monitor in the city of Painesville, that is not sufficient to monitor for the volatile air emissions from the injection well. Assessment descriptions in the ODNR permit are minimal and do not address the health or environmental impacts on local residents. When the well was permitted in 2008, there was no pre-site review conducted, since ODNR classified the injection well as not in an urban area. I was informed by our township trustees that basically they were told by ODNR that even if they commented and objected to the injection well permitting, the permit would be approved by ODNR anyway. I do not believe the township trustees would support the ODNR permitting of the injection well based on my discussions with them. There is no benefit to the township, only risk. This injection well is not recommended in the 2018 Leroy Township Comprehensive Plan, nor was it in the earlier version of the plan, and is not an industrial or commercial use that fits into the local Leroy Township zoning laws. In the comprehensive plan, there are 268 responses by residents to a question on what type of businesses, commercial uses would you like to see in Leroy Township? And not one of the responses wanted an injection well. In a later comment section in the comprehensive plan, residents commented on their opposition to injection wells in Leroy Township. I have discussed this with many residents in Leroy and found them very much opposed to the injection well. The Leroy Township trustees have battled violations of local zoning laws with the injection well owner, or illegal signage is one example, in front of this injection well property for many years. I personally voiced my concerns about the injection well to our township trustees and to ODNR. I met with the ODNR inspector and requested a walkthrough of the site, the injection well site, with him. After the ODNR inspector reviewed my request, he informed me that the ODNR inspectors were having difficulties with the owner operator of the injection well and were trying to address several violations, and therefore a walkthrough would not be possible. I also contacted ODNR to discuss earthquake risks and was told that no seismic monitors were available, and if there was to be a concern with earthquakes, it would reveal itself within the first year of operation. ODNR informed me there was no requirement for continuous monitoring on the older injection wells. I contacted a USGS expert who indicated seismic monitors would provide a good proactive early detection of low seismic activity. Earthquakes induced by an injection well would have long-term serious ramifications to Leroy Township residents, as well as surrounding areas around Leroy Township. The minimal seismic analysis during the ODNR permitting process is not commensurate with the significant risk of increased seismic activity from the injection well. Recently, the property which contains the injection well was purchased by the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. This property contains 4 or 5 other injection wells adjacent to 4 or 5 vertical wells, I'm sorry, not injection wells, vertical wells, adjacent to the injection well, which are also under ODNR permit with the same owner operator as the injection well. There are numerous violations on the vertical wells, which ODNR has not resolved with the owner operator for many years. The Western Reserve Land Conservancy is trying to get ownership of these permits from that owner operator with the goal to find funding to cap the vertical wells. The Western Reserve Land Conservancy informed me they have completed an independent environmental assessment, and due to the poor tore up condition of the injection well property, it is not in their best interest to keep the property. The Western Reserve Land Conservancy has segregated the injection wells commercial property into an LLC and will likely in the future put this up for sale. This leaves Leroy Township and its residents shouldering a no-win, unpredictable situation, living for generations with the legacy of a long-term, significant, irrecoverable health and environmental impacts and risks from the injection well. That ends my testimony.
My name is Nick Teddy. I'm a member of Coshocton Environmental and Community Awareness Incorporated. We are a group of citizen volunteers who organized a 501c3 to protect our community's environment. Ohio needs federal regulatory oversight of all operations of the oil and gas industry to assure the safety of our citizens. Specifically, we need the EPA to begin asserting control over injection wells and the handling of toxic, highly radioactive oil field waste that the state of Ohio is permitting to be dumped on our roads for use as a de-icer and dust suppressor. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources is tasked with oversight of this waste stream. They have conducted tests that confirm that oil field brine from both conventional and horizontally drilled oil and gas wells contain dangerously high amounts of radium from the oil shales. Yet their websites promotes this radioactive waste to unsuspecting truckers as a harmless saline liquid that could be handled and spread, quote, with minimal risk to groundwater contamination. ODNR makes no mention of their own test results, which can be seen in Appendix 1, which I have attached to my testimony. So that is our brine fact sheet. Despite the fact that tests show levels of radium-236 and 238 far exceeding the maximum environmental discharge level, the agency will not act to protect Ohio's rural families. The waste is currently being marketed as aqua salina after the addition of an anti-corrosive agent. This does not reduce the radioactivity, which is not even near safe release levels. The state legislature has deregulated the disposal of this waste and is allowing it to be spread in our neighborhoods without inspections for radioactive contamination, with inadequate monitoring of aqua salina's radiation levels, and with limited accountability. The ODNR is ineffective and fatally compromised agency that has been suborned into compliance with the interests of the industry it should be monitoring and regulating. It has little interest in protecting the people of Ohio from the threats of pollution flowing into our state from the oil and gas operations on the Marcellus Shale. Ohio has become the processing, disposal, and storage center for billions of gallons of toxic radioactive liquid and solid waste. Tons of volatile organic compounds and methane gas generated by fracking operations are leaking into our air. Now, in my own county, ODNR's handling of the Buckeye Brine injection wells. In 2011, the owner of a waste disposal business called Buckeye Brine obtained land at the junction of three rivers in Coshocton County that flow into the Ohio-Mississippi Basin. He was previously shut down by the state of Texas with a record of multiple toxic gas releases and ground pollution events that devastated the small town of Winona, Texas. He applied for permits to construct 3 injection wells built to Class 1 standards on the river junction site, on the junction site to 3 rivers. ODNR granted the permit for this site for the wells to begin heavy industrial operations, handling, storing, and processing toxic radioactive oil field waste. No consideration by ODNR was given to the risks and impact on the community that the location of this site would pose. It is located on the same road with our airport and public golf course. Directly across the road are 2 schools, the Hopewell Special Needs School and the Coshocton County Joint Vocational School. Located next to them is a major commercial site, the Coshocton Super Walmart Center, and a strip mall hosting various small businesses. Within a 1/2 mile radius of the site is the residential community of Canal Louisville, 2 churches, and a daycare center. The water well field for the city of Coshocton is also located at the junction of these rivers, along with Lake Park, a recreational area that provides the people of Coshocton with swimming, picnicking, an outdoor concert pavilion, a baseball field, a soccer field for our young people, and a soccer field for our young people. The injection wells are near the border of our restored canal town, Roscoe Village, that is a local tourist attraction and a cultural center that provides community celebration and serves people from around the nation during holidays. It is also home to the Central Ohio Technical College branch campus. Next to Roscoe Village is the Footlight Players Theater, where local productions of live theater are staged. In the midst of all these essential core institutions promoting local culture, religion, education, and commerce, ODNR saw no problem with installing a mega toxic waste business. The injection wells were hyped to be safe and reliable in accord with the industry narrative. However, within a few years of operation, 2 of the wells had major problems. One well was built with a faulty cement seal around the system of pipes that injected the waste under our aquifers. In spite of this defect, the well was permitted by ODNR to inject Class 2 oil field waste. They continued to inject waste until they applied to the EPA for a Class 1 waste permit. Buckeye Brine was told no permit could be granted by OEPA until the cement was repaired. According to inspection reports, the second well was having problems getting the rock strata to accept the waste Buckeye Brine was trying to inject. They made numerous attempts to remedy this by injecting large quantities of acid into the well. Eventually, the pipe used to inject the waste separated and the well became unusable. The law required that the wells in this condition be plugged after 6 months. The chief of ODNR intervened and allowed this breached well to remain a pollution threat to the upper layers for over 2 years.
My name is Ted Auk. I've been working at a nonprofit called Frac Tracker for about 8.5 years. And prior to that, I got a PhD in environmental science at the University of Vermont. When I started working at Frac Tracker, I knew dangerously little about the whole thing. And I spent a lot of my first couple of years just learning and trying to listen and better understand where I could tackle this issue and try to help the people that are on this line and others better understand it and hold the industry to account. And it became really clear to me really quickly by way of Teresa and others and Roxanne and others, Heather Cantino and the like, that waste is the key when it comes to discussing fracking in Ohio. It also became really clear pretty quickly thereafter that waste is the Achilles heel of this industry, of the oil and gas industry writ large. And then quickly thereafter, I realized that when Pennsylvania and West Virginia decided they weren't going to go all in on Class 2 wells, somehow, some way, Ohio raised its hand and said, you know what, we'll do it. Don't worry about that. So we have taken all of the onus off of those 2 states to deal with this thing that is the fracking waste issue. Because we are so kind of willing to do that. And that gets to the point of this whole thing, which is the whole issue around Department of Natural Resources primacy. And I thought, for a long time, like, they're just way too cozy. This is a regulator that's way too cozy. It received Class 2 well primacy at a different time, in a time when you couldn't possibly envision what it is the fracking boom would bring to Ohio, to Ohio. So the idea that, like, back then, this was something we could predict and we have to have this as a static kind of condition whereby DNR just maintains primacy no matter what's going on around it or within it, seems pretty, seems pretty foolish to me. So one thing that I've been doing a lot at Frac Tracker, and Teresa and others have been doing work before me and during me, but one thing I've been looking at with my colleagues at Frac Tracker in these 3 states are the gaps with respect to data transparency, quality, and availability as it relates to fracking waste. And one thing that's really clear, as I always like to say when I talk to folks from outside of Ohio, is like, our regulator is in an analog age when the rest of the industry and all of its partners in Silicon Valley and the like are in a high-tech digital age. And what that's done is it's overrun the system. So you have a regulator, it's overrun, both in terms of volume of waste coming into the state, the number of wells, the lack of inspectors. Inspectors are not coupled to the amount of activity happening in the state. So you have this condition whereby back in 2011, 2012, you had a certain amount of waste coming into Ohio, being generated in Ohio, and you had a number of inspectors for that. But those inspectors, to my eye, have not kept pace with the amount of activity. So you have this ratio that's ballooned. The other thing that's ballooned is the amount of brine that's coming out of unconventional wells relative to conventional wells. And what we've seen with the data we've compiled at Frac Tracker is like this ratio of brine produced per unit of gas produced across the 3 states has skyrocketed. It's gone exponential. And that means going forward in the next 5-10 years, you're going to have an increasing demand on the one state that has decided to go into the Class 2 well business whole hog in Ohio, you're going to have an increased demand on us. And then you have all these things that you all are aware of, which are these kind of new and novel, and I would say dangerous and dubious ways of disposing of waste and moving it around in the form of these barge offloading facilities and Austin Masters and you name it. But the point is if you throw all this in, you see a regulator in the Department of Natural Resources that is just, it's playing in the big kid's pool, and it's not a big kid. It's not acting like a big kid. It doesn't have the funds to be the big kid. It doesn't have the number of people to keep pace with the industry. And I guess Michelle hasn't spoken yet, and I'll let her speak for herself. But I know, for example, Michelle's story is very compelling, as is the story of the folks in Brookfield and Judy Berger, who we've recently met down in outside of St. Clairsville. It's really clear that these class 2 wells are not proposals, because the word proposal implies that something might not happen. We don't ever see that. It's never a might not happen. It's always a baked in kind of situation, whereby in Belmont County, no matter who is objecting to it, whether it's, the sinister Frank Hoagland or the even more sinister, Robert Murray, even if they object to these things, they still happen. So it calls to question the ability of our, underground injection control program to manage these class 2 wells. And I think from a data standpoint, looking at several other states like Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, just to name a few, relative to our understanding of our class 2 wells from a volume standpoint, from a timeliness standpoint, that is to say, when a unit of brine goes into an injection well, how long until we actually know it went there? It's gotten to the point where the data that the state collects, the UIC collects, and this speaks to its inability, it should not have primacy anymore. It's gotten to the point where this data is no longer data anymore. It's this like kind of, it's kind of this trail of, it's like a loose trail that you kind of follow and try to interpolate in between the trail markings, what's going on. We're kind of like trying to divine what it is a class 2 well program in Ohio actually means, because the data just is really so poor. So I think that when I think of why class DNR should not have primacy, I think it has demonstrated that it's too cozy in its relationship with the industry, lags way behind with respect to data reporting, data availability, and inspecting and the like. And then I also think that going forward, if the past is a prologue, we are going to have more and more demand on our injection wells on our waste disposal sites, because the industry is getting less efficient on the production side, which means that they're going to cut even more corners, and that's going to demand more injection wells, more dubious ways to dispose of waste. So now is the time to take that away from them, because we're coming up on this horizon where I see efficiencies dropping off a cliff in the fracking world, and that's going to put a huge pressure on us as a state and our UIC program, and they have not handled the pressure to this point. There's no reason to think they will in the future. So all of those things are kind of why I think we should this is a valuable exercise, because it's probably 5 years too late, but at the same time, no time better than the present. So I'm glad to see this being done, and I hope that my reasoning makes sense. So,
as a local official, I'm very frustrated with the Ohio primacy process here, and looking at what's going on in the surrounding states and looking at the standards on an issue like this that should be equal. Primacy was designed to let states be more stringent rather than less stringent than the national standard. And when you look at the fact that in Ohio, wells get permitted very quickly, they're very slow to be enforced for compliance and closed down properly. It all stems from a lot of underfunding at the state level. And you look at the way the Ohio tax structure has been changed to be favorable to the oil and gas business as opposed to the enforcement business, that is a problem. And when you see why we get more injection waste here, the data has been presented a number of different times as to the amount of volume of waste that comes here. Why is it cheaper to truck waste from Pennsylvania and West Virginia into Ohio? The cost of trucking today is very expensive. And so when you look at the fact that if you had an injection well in an area where this is taking place, it should be done there, not shipped to another state. But because it's cheaper to permit and operate here, that seems to be a problem. It's one that should be changed, and a good reason why the primacy should be taken back as it comes to the regulation of these wells. Time to permit is faster in Ohio. The people will argue that that's an efficiency that's coming from Ohio doing it themselves. I think that's really not the answer. I think it's a shortcut of steps and process. When you said that, we held the public hearing, that's because ODNR doesn't hold the public hearings. If the local people want to make complaints, they just fall on deaf ears. We tried to get the law changed in Ohio. The County Commissioners Association did, to require that these hearings be held when a local body of elected officials request it. We couldn't even get that done. It was shut down by the oil and gas industry. So the process needs to get changed. It needs to be more sensitive to the local environment. When you look at the Ginsburg well in our county and what a tragedy that's been, and such a fiasco over the years, where it's been cited for violations, then been given so much time to comply, the compliance doesn't take place, it's still in violation. And so it goes on for years and years, and each time it rains, you get pollution that comes out. So it's a problem of doing the process correctly, quickly, and efficiently, and that isn't happening in Ohio because it's neglecting the environment at the expense of the people that are living there, and allowing for oil and gas businesses to take care of distributing their waste from other states into our state. One of the biggest things that you look at is the protection of our local resources, especially when it comes to water. And the injection wells, we really can't determine. It's going to be a long time before we can determine how far those injection wastes are traveling and moving along, if they're being contained in the actual places they're injected, or they're actually moving into our aquifers. And that's going to be a long time study that's going to have to take place. And the funding isn't there to do those sorts of things. So they're asking for other people to do it rather than ODNR regulating it and doing it the way they should be doing it. So when you look at all the factors combined, it really points to the fact that this should be taken back by the US EPA and not allow Ohio to do primacy in this case.
So my name is Michelle Garman. I reside at 1111 Youngstown Kingsville Road, Vienna, Ohio. This is Trumbull County, a property which is contingent to the Youngstown Warren Regional Airport at 1143 Youngstown Kingsville Road. There is a company called Copper Ridge Disposal, LLC, and they are my next door neighbor. Copper Ridge exists exclusively to run the toxic waste injection well that I can reach out and touch from the northern property line of my home where myself and my son reside. My husband learned that Cleese Development Associates, KDA, was seeking a permit for a fracking waste injection well from the legal notice in the Warren Tribune Chronicle. At that point, I started learning what fracking and fracking waste injection wells were. I did not like what I learned. Fearing what KDA wanted to put next to my home, following all the proper procedures, I started asking people to object to it being placed in Vienna Township, next to a residential home and in a non-industrial zone section of the township. I even approached our trustees at one of their regular meetings. So many people told me it was nothing to worry about and that I was worried for nothing. So many times I was told the state of Ohio could do whatever they wanted to. Then in April of 2015, I remember well because it was Easter, a KDA spill on Sodom Hutchings in Vienna Township, which is a different, I think they had like a few injection wells on the property. They left a slew of dead animals and many residents worried about their drinking water and their health. The first thing that popped into my head when I heard the news was Love Canal. I remembered in 1978, when I was only 9 years old, the stories I was hearing about the place and the tragedy the people there experienced, I remembered how people, well, I remember thinking, how do people get through something like that? And I also thought, that's it. There's no way KDA will be permitted to have their well on the Youngstown Kingsville Road now. And I was wrong. The state of Ohio and KDA Copper Ridge got to do whatever they wanted. My first concern was over drinking water and water pollution, along with spills like the one on Sodom Hutchings. I then started worrying about future health concerns. Health concerns not so much for me, but that of my teenage son, who now was about to turn 21. I wondered what effects this will have on his health at my age. There were the usual concerns over increased truck traffic. This became a reality when they began working on the facility, as trucks came by dropping large rocks onto my property and backing up the traffic in front of my drive, leaving me unable to pull out at times. Now that they are actually injecting, there's truck traffic at all hours. It does not really back up in front of my home anymore. And the strange thing is that most of the truck traffic through the facility is on weekends, holidays, and between the hours of 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. I also worry about air quality and air pollution. Every once in a while, we do get a slightly foul odor from the well. And then there's earthquakes. Who can forget the New Year's earthquake from the North Star well and the earthquakes that shut down the Wethersfield well not even 10 miles from my home? This reminds me of a conversation I had with my cousin who lives outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was asking her about the earthquakes due to fracking there. She said it was no big deal anymore. My comment was, seriously, how do you get used to something like that? She stated that when they first moved to Oklahoma, they never had earthquakes, but now that they happen so often, she's just used to them. This left me thinking that is something I never want to get used to. I now fear lightning strikes, along with possible fire and explosions. Are the emergency services in Little Vienna Township prepared for such things? Is 200 feet far enough away from such things? Then there was the one time a few years back when Copper Ridge just began operating. A warning light and alarm would go off sometimes when trucks were dumping their waste. I was told by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, ODNR, and Copper Ridge that it was an overflow alarm and nothing to worry about. And by the way, every time I call ODNR, they talk to Copper Ridge, it's always an overflow problem. I just stopped calling them. So about a month later, they were drilling again, and I believe they had to replace a casing. I am always worried now that the pumps sound like they're running rough, because just before this happened, the pumps sounded really strange. This does not leave me, the whole experience just didn't leave me warm and fuzzy about having them next to me. Around the time I gave this first testimony, I was also dealing with rude and hostile harassment from workers employed by KDA, Diamond, which is another offshoot of KDA, and Copper Ridge. Luckily, I don't hear much from them anymore. Something must be done. Local control must be given so that city and township residents do not have to live in fear of their neighbor. Local, state, and federal government was created to protect its citizens. They need to protect us. This is where my testimony from the last tribunal ended, which I guess brings us to what things are like now. The people that were harassing have gone silent. I don't think any of them work at the site anymore. This may also be due to the fact I just don't say much about it anymore. It seems to be old news, news that no one wants to hear. People seem to have forgotten the fear of the spill and the earthquake. And I've just learned to live with the fact that it's there and it's not going away. Yet there are constant reminders of its presence. There's always a constant hum of the pumps day and night. I kind of compare it to watching Star Trek Generations, How throughout the show, if you listen really carefully, you can hear the hum of the engines, except it's not a 1-hour fictional TV episode. It's every day for the rest of my life. Also, about 2 or 3 a.m. every morning, it gets increasingly louder. And it stays this way for about an hour or two every night. There are no more alarms. There's a voice in my head that keeps me wondering if they just disconnected the alarm. Maybe I'm paranoid. If I am, it's because of the thing next to my home. Since the last tribunal, I have gone through a divorce. I'm not going to say that the toxic injection well was the direct cause of this, but it was a contributing factor. We had many disagreements about how to react to this injection well next to us. Not long after the tribunal, a piece of my heart was taken from me. My companion, protector, and furry sibling to my son passed away, our beloved German Shepherd, Billy. I often wonder if the water runoff into the field she used to run in was a factor in her death. She had a growth that had ruptured, and it was very sudden. She died in my arms in the parking lot of the veterinary clinic. And I wonder about this cause because this water runoff goes right into Squaw Creek. I still worry about air quality. There are no monitors alerting us to the substance that we're being released by this thing most days. I don't think much about it except for a couple of months back, there was an oily smell emanating from the facility, and it was so bad I couldn't stand to be outside. I even jumped through the 50 million hoops needed to contact ODNR. An inspector came out the next day, and of course, the smell was already gone. One of the few small joys in my day is sitting on the porch with my coffee. That day, I couldn't even bear to open my door due to the smell. This brings me to the truck traffic. It's constant 24/7, 365, up to 4 at a time. Many times as one is pulling out, another's pulling in, almost all from Pennsylvania. The sound of their whining and screeching brakes is especially pleasing around 2 a.m. Yeah, and that's sarcasm. And I'd like to end this with this thought. 200 feet. When the GPS tells you to turn in 200 feet, you best be ready to turn. This is about 70 adult steps. Walking from here to there wouldn't even get my daily steps in. This is the length of about 3 of the large trucks that pull into the well site every day. It's about 10 car lengths, the length of an NHL hockey field. How would you feel with a ticking time bomb 200 feet away? That's how I feel every day.
Hello, my name is Tom Ratine. My wife Ann and I live on Pickering Road in Belmont County, Ohio, near the small town of St. Clairsville. And preparations for this injection well began over a year ago, clearing ground and things like this. So my intention is to give you a little bit of a rundown on our experience following the points that were given to me that I could follow, so I wouldn't just meander all over the place with my comments. So here's what I've got. I'm going to read this to you. Your experience with ODNR, Division of Oil and Gas. All right, regarding communication. The ODNR inspector, Ryan Armstrong, does not communicate with us unless called upon to do so. When we have called him or other ODNR officials, our questions are often brushed aside. One official we spoke to in Columbus, a gentleman named Dave Ball, kept passing the buck saying, regarding our questions, in quotes, "That is up to the higher ups. That is up to the higher ups." He said this repeatedly. We had asked about the sign required by the permit, the gate required by the permit, and the sound light barrier required by the permit. When asked whether the logs prepared by Omni, the the company that's doing this well, Omni Energy Group, LLC, regarding their drilling process, whether the logs could be trusted, our inspector, Ryan, really had no answer. There was no indication that anyone from ODNR would be checking them for accuracy. He said that his main interest with the site was the actual drilling of the hole and cementing of the casing. He said something to the effect that he would be here 24/7 during that process. He seemed to be washing his hands of any activities on the site other than the drilling itself. But now that the drilling is in progress, we have not seen that much of Ryan. All right, point number 2 were noted violations that were never followed up. There is no real fence around the site. Omni did put up an orange snowdrift fence where the site borders partially with ours and with Pickering Road. It is a pathetic effort which may technically be called a fence, but is not a serious barrier to anything or anyone. It was put up, we imagine, because when much of the property was excavated, a sort of high wall was created where Omni's property adjoins ours. A stranger wandering around in the dark could face serious injury if he fell over the wall. About 15 feet, I suppose, is the distance from the top to the bottom. We suspect that their lawyers suggested the fence. There is still no gate for the property off Pickering Road. There are now ingress-egress points onto US Route 40 from the site. These are very recent additions. Until recently, Omni was accessing the site from Pickering Road, which is the road we live on, and this was not authorized, or from a lot just east of Pickering Road. Omni had no permit to use this lot from US Route 40. Nevertheless, it was used by multiple trucks every day. Technically, this was a problem for ODOT, but they've showed no willingness to enforce their own rule. Trucks entering this lot would then have to cross Pickering Road to reach the well site. All right, point 3. Knowledge of violations, spills, leaks, explosions, cleanups. Well, no serious explosions that we're aware of, but I will say a spill of oil or diesel fuel on Pickering Road was reported to Ohio EPA, which supposedly reported it to ODNR. To our knowledge, no action was taken. After a week or so, the spill was washed away by rain and snow. Trucks have left muddy tracks as they cross Pickering Road, the same as they have exited from Pickering Road onto US Route 40 and from the eastern lot onto US Route 40. Even now, there are deficiencies in the permit, we are told. Omni has faced no repercussions. Omni's permit allows the use of earthen barriers for sound and light mitigation. This is completely insufficient as far as we're concerned. Come to our home and walk into our yard to experience this earthen barrier mitigation. Light shines into our bedroom at night. While annoying, I can nevertheless get to sleep. My wife, however, struggles to do so. Public hearings. A public hearing was promised to the people of Belmont County to allow them to express their objection to these injection wells. This never happened. The promised hearing was delayed temporarily, then permanently by the COVID-19 pandemic. A public hearing was never held. A good excuse not to have to hear from us. After sitting on Omni's permit for several months, ODNR was directed by the Ohio Supreme Court to make a decision. Of course, they chose to grant the permit. There is no record of any permit for saltwater injection being rejected by ODNR. All right, we're supposed to express, this is point 5, express our dissatisfaction with agency oversight. Our experience with the whole injection well process has been short, but in the months that we have been dealing with it, we have seen how ineffective, and may I use the word corrupt, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources seems to be. Numerous comments were sent to them. Many were hand-delivered, expressing the objections of the citizens of Richland Township and Belmont County. ODNR saw nothing relevant in these objections, we were told. There is no good place for a saltwater injection well, but this has to be about the worst possible site. The intersection of a major interstate highway, I-70, with a major U.S. highway, U.S. Route 40, and a state highway, State Route 331, standing by the wells, it is possible to throw a stone and hit any and all of them. Throw a bit farther and you could hit any of 3 gas stations. Within a mile is Ohio University Eastern, a state prison, the Belmont Harrison Joint Vocational School, now called the Career Center, Belmont College, the Belmont County Health Department, and other county offices, the Friends Church and School, and the Belmont Hills Country Club. The salt water that will be injected into these wells has been shown to be toxic and even radioactive. From what I've heard, this information is not required to be shared with the drivers or other workers involved in this process. I find this hard to believe. I would think they would at least have to sign a release of some sort to be put on the job doing these things. These workers end up taking this stuff home to their families, and they're going to be dumping it in the ground less than 300 feet from where I live. It can be argued that the Ohio Department of Natural Resources is not really a regulatory agency whose purpose is to protect the citizens of Ohio. Instead, it seems to function as an arm of the oil and gas industry that it is supposed to regulate. It is a captive of the industry and does not serve the people of the state. I will finish by telling of the difficulties we face living next to an injection well site. The disruption to our daily lives as we attempt to document the goings-on at the site, the logging of events, the daily efforts to photograph what is happening over there in case someone might actually care. There is the noise of the diesel engines and the generators, the smell of the exhaust, which is totally unhealthy. There is the stress of living with these conditions. My wife wanders around the house many nights, looking out of our window to see what is happening. We worry about the quality of the air we breathe. We worry about the possible presence of radioactive substances on our road and in our air. Finally, there's the smug arrogance of the site director, who struts around like a king, using the F word or making the FU gesture to anyone who looks at him the wrong way and seems to challenge his authority. I'll finish again by saying that ODNR should not have primacy in regulating these wells. The oil and gas industry seems to have primacy over the ODNR. The industry should be regulated by the US EPA or some other agency which is beyond the reach of the industry. Thank you.